So certainly it is done that we say together, and so it is. So we wish all the moms out there a happy Mother's Day. And we wish all of our moms, wherever they may be, here or the next plane, happy Mother's Day. And we also recognize that this day is perhaps bittersweet for some of us. For many of us, our moms are already gone. And we wish we had that one more hug, that one more opportunity to thank them and tell them just what they meant to us. And of course we can still do that, but in our heart. For some of us, we didn't know our moms. For whatever reason, we may not have met and experienced the presence of our actual mother. And it can be sad. And what we want to recognize is that the unconditional love that motherhood represents, we can experience that in other ways. For some folks, perhaps mom wasn't available to us. Perhaps she was dealing with issues, her own, still growing up, still learning, still discovering what it means to be a spiritual being in a human experience. And we may feel we didn't get all the love that we wanted. But we have to love back. We have to love unconditionally and accept that they were doing the best they could with what they were capable of at the time. So as I say, this day is a mixed bag of emotions, because we celebrate the wonder of motherhood, we celebrate the joy of motherhood, and we have to recognize that a lot of people didn't have that experience, but we also recognize that they still can. So whatever our experience was, I invite you now to move beyond your personal experience and go with me to this concept of unconditional love. Accept motherhood as a symbol here on earth of God's unconditional love for us and through us. There's a beautiful post someone shared on Facebook this week, and it has some writings by Thich Nhat Hanh. And he was talking about the grief he felt when his own mother passed. He said the loss was tremendous. He just didn't understand how he could deal with it. And that then he came to realize, that this was unconditional love. The feeling that he had was unconditional love. And I say it's a feeling because it's not a thought. It is beyond words. It is before words. One of the things that we want to recognize as we are on our spiritual path is that thinking can only point the way for us. It's the razor's edge. The intellect is sharp enough to tell us that the intellect is not all that there is. That there is something before the intellect. There is something beyond the intellect. And in order to experience the fullness of the presence of the divine, which is the experience of unconditional love, we must transcend mind. We must transcend thinking. The East tells us that we're not trying to fix mind. Psychiatry tries to fix mind, and that's good in what it does. But on the spiritual path, we are not trying to fix thinking. We are trying to transcend thinking. Because as long as we are thinking, as long as we are stuck in our head, as long as we are in our intellect and we are analyzing and dividing and all of those things, we're not feeling. We're not feeling the presence. For the last few weeks, I've been using the example of a fan blade that's spinning. You know, it's summertime and it's hot and we have the fans out and we can hear them whirring, but if we look into the fan, we don't see the blade. We kind of see through the blade. It's moving so fast that the gaps between the blades allow just enough of what's behind the fan to come through that we can see that there's something back there. But yet we know that we can't go into the fan. We can't push something into the fan and get it through to the other side because the busyness of the fan blades whirling about prevents us from actually accessing physically what's on the far side. Now, I'm not suggesting everybody go out and get a fan and try this experiment. It's a thought experiment. We get the idea. So the presence of the divine is like that to us. The experience of unconditional love is like that to us in that it is there, it is present, but we really usually don't experience the fullness of it because of the busyness of our minds, of our thoughts, whatever we want to call that. I don't know that anybody would agree on what a mind is and what a thought is and what consciousness is, but we each have our own ideas when I use those words. The activity of the monkey mind, to put it in terms from the East, the grasshopper mind that hops from here to there to everywhere. The thing about love and the thing about our relationship with our mothers is that the love was there before we even had a word for it, you know? Before we even had a concept of what love is, you know? I mean, if you were in a group of people right now and you asked what is love, you would get all sorts of opinions, right? And of course, opinions are kind of delusions. They're things that we make up in our head. They're things that we believe to be true, and yet they may or may not be true. They're just a thought, just an opinion, just an idea that we've latched onto. And many different people from different parts of the world are going to have different opinions. But the opinion is not love. The opinion is not love. Right? I refer back to the painting by the Belgian artist, and I'm sorry I can't remember his name right now, but it's a painting of a tobacco pipe with a curved stem like Sherlock Holmes. Basil Rathbone in the movies might have smoked. And there's printing on the bottom of the painting, and it says in French, "This is not a pipe." And you look at that, I look at that and say, well, what is it? Of course it's a pipe, you know. It's got a bowl of tobacco, there's smoke coming out of it, it's got a curved stem, it's got a mouthpiece for somebody to put in their mouth. Of course it's a pipe, but it's not a pipe, you see. It's a painting of a pipe. And what happens to us as we go through life is sometimes we get confused between the symbol of something, the image of something, the representation of something, and the actual something. And I invite you today to consider that about love, particularly unconditional love, and particularly the love that motherhood represents on this earth. Dr. Frederick Bales, in his book, Your Mind Can Heal You, has an entire chapter, and he talks about the miracle of a young baby's body, a fetus, developing in its mother's womb. And he uses it as an example of how divine love has worked out all of the details. Divine love takes care of this entire process without thought, you see, without thought, autonomously, automatically. The sperm and the egg unite, And the Eastern mystics tell us that at the moment of conception, there's a flash of light. Now, I often wondered how would they know, but in reading more and studying more about where their ideas come from, is the mystics state that they had a way of turning their consciousness within, and they could see the operation of the body within. And that's how they knew so much about the physiology of the human body before doctors even discovered it through autopsy and surgery and things. Now, I can't tell you that that's true. I can tell you that they say that. But perhaps that's how they came to this understanding that at the moment of conception, as the sperm and the egg unite, there's a flash of light. There's a flash of light. So what happens is we have two cells, and they divide. They each give up half of themselves and take on half of the other self. And these two become one with a unique pattern of DNA. But then that one divides and becomes two. And then the two divide and become four, and so on and so on and so on. And at a timetable worked out not by human thought, some of the cells become hard and become bones, and some become soft and become tissue, and some become transparent and we can see through them. And some specialize and become hard, and some specialize and become lungs. And Dr. Bales asks us to just consider how miraculous this entire operation is. How the divine has provided at every step of the way. How the mother's food becomes the baby's food. The child doesn't even have to breathe air. It gets the oxygenated blood through the umbilical cord. Its little lungs breathe in and out the amniotic fluid, which strengthens them, and they're gonna last a lifetime, developing perfectly according to a perfect schedule. And when the time of the birth arrives, the baby rolls head down so that its mouth and its nose will be some of the first things that appear into this world. And as the little baby's body passes through the birth canal, it is squeezed tight. And what that does is it squeezes all of the fluid out of the lungs. So our first act as our body comes into the world, as our little chest exits the birth canal and it naturally springs open, our first act is to draw in the breath of life that was there before we were born. Divine love provided the air we would breathe before it developed our little lungs. But it developed our little lungs in anticipation that the air was already there. And Bales asks us to just consider how complex this process is, how complicated the process is, how worked out in detail the process is without any human thought. Divine love taking care of us, taking care of our physical bodies from the moment of conception. And there's an intelligence that comes in that little package, or perhaps around that little package, or perhaps is everywhere, and we see only part of it in that little package. When I was training to work on the ambulance many, many years ago, we were trained in emergency childbirth. And what they would tell us is that if you had to deliver a baby in the ambulance or in the home, The first thing you would do after the baby was born and you were sure that it was breathing, we had little aspirator tubes if we needed to clear mucus out of their airways. The first thing we would do is wrap the baby in something warm and hand it to the mother to nurse. Now this one is just 2 or 3 minutes old, and it knows how to nurse. And there's reasons for that. There were medical reasons for that. First of all, it was good for the baby. It was good for the mother. It calmed everybody down. And it helped to pass the placenta. How wonderful is life that it has this all worked out. And here's this beautiful little creature who's in this world for just a couple minutes. And it knows how to nurse. And how beautiful is the mother's body that has the nourishment, developed the nourishment that this little one would need during the pregnancy. Bales asks us to just stop and look at that. And to realize how magnificent this whole process is. And this is part of the symbolism of what motherhood represents. Just part of it. This is the physical part of it. This is just part of it. How can we doubt that there's something, an intelligence somewhere or something that has this all worked out perfectly? And if we contemplate that, we get beyond the thoughts, you see, of just the physical process. And we start to get into the mystical feeling of the divine presence, Now, of course, the miracle doesn't stop the moment that we are born. If we look at our own bodies or the bodies of our children, that intelligence is with them and with us our entire life here on this planet. If we cut a finger, it heals, If we break a bone, it heals. Bales goes on to ask us, if you were cut and you lost some blood, would you know exactly how much water to drink and what kind of foods to eat and how much salt to take so that your body would be able to replace that lost blood? And of course, none of us intellectually can sit down with a slide ruler and a pen and figure that out. But we don't have to, you see, because the loving presence that created us and is taking care of us guides our desire, guides our hunger, guides our thirst. We may crave a certain food. We may crave a certain beverage. So love is taking care of us from the moment of conception and before, and to the moment of death and beyond. Divine love is with us, has never abandoned us, could never leave us. But if we go beyond the physical and we consider the emotional, we consider the feeling nature of love, And again, the term feeling nature is kind of a wide open thing, What are feelings? What are emotions? What are sensations? How do they work together? Do thoughts create feelings? Do feelings create thoughts? All of these things would drive a philosopher crazy. But we're not interested in philosophy today. We are interested in love. And before that child is able to speak, it is able to love. It is able to interact with its mother. Who's the first love of our lives? It's our mother. Right? Who holds us, who speaks to us in soft tones, The little child is not capable of speech. It doesn't have a concept to turn into speech, to turn into words. But yet it loves, you see, it loves. And the mother loves the child back. So if the baby starts to coo and make gaga sounds and happy sounds and little things like that, the mother coos back to it and makes gaga sounds and loving sounds like that. This is the presence and the activity of love beyond words. Because love is not an intellectual exercise. And God is not an intellectual exercise. And God is love. And God is love. Can we find that place within us that loves before the concept, that experiences love before or beyond any words that could possibly describe it, you know? In Buddhism, there's a saying, it says, if you meet the Buddha walking down the road, kill him. Sounds a bit harsh, but what they're saying is, you haven't met the Buddha. You've met your concept of it. You've met your image of it. You've met your symbol of it. And if you wish to really experience Buddha consciousness, you must move beyond that symbol, you see. Move beyond that symbol. So we get stuck in our heads, you see, in our society. We get stuck in our egos. We get stuck in our small I amness, which is nothing more than a delusion of thought. It's an opinion of who we are and the way life ought to be and all of those things. Can we take ourselves to a place where mind falls off, where body falls off, where we just experience love? So take that image of a mother, perhaps your mother, and a baby, perhaps yourself. Just a few hours old, just a few days old, just a few weeks old. And that mother is just loving that little one. Mm-hmm. And that little one is just loving its mother. And it has no concept of love, but it knows love. See, that's something that I think it's difficult for us in our culture to understand, to accept that there is a knowing before thinking. There is a knowing beyond thinking. There is a knowing without thought. And yet, here we have the image of a beautiful little baby and a beautiful mother experiencing love without words, without concept, just love. Can you and I, can we close our eyes? Can we get away from analyzing what love is? You know? Can we get away from classifying love as a relationship, or classifying love as a role, or classifying love as a responsibility, and just experiencing love? Just experiencing love. Our society has a tough time doing that. A tough time. Because we create, as I say, all of these delusions of love, these romantic fantasies of love. Well, if I love you and you love me, then life is going to be wonderful and we can do all these things. That's an idea. That's a concept. And it's not divine love. Not that there's anything wrong with having a relationship, being head over heels in love, and having a wonderful life together. That's all beautiful. That's all a beautiful expression of love. But I'm talking about unconditional love. Talking about agape love, as Christians would call it. I'm talking about love without rhyme or without reason, without thought, without expectation of anything in return, you know. In the email last night, I mentioned a story, and I know I've mentioned it on Mother's Day in the past, but it just touched me so, and it's got to be over 20, maybe 30 years since I first saw the program. We were involved in a prison ministry in Durham. We had a group of volunteers, and we would go into a minimum security prison camp, the ones that they have next to the DOT facilities, and we would meet with some of the inmates in there, and when they got to the point where they could get a pass, where they could go out for a few hours, we would take them out, take them to church on Sunday, those kind of things. So I was very interested in prisons, prison reform, prison ministries, and all those kind of things. But as an aside, if you're interested in that, the Mennonites have the best information available on that. But there was a show on in North Carolina, and it was about men who had gone to prison for life. They were in prison for the rest of their life. There was no possibility of parole. And the documentary, they were interviewing these men to get their perspective on their situation in life. And this one gentleman, I remember, his candor just stuck with me. And they asked him, they said, well, what's your biggest regret about going to prison? What's your biggest regret about spending your entire life in prison? He was in Caledonia, which is a prison farm down the eastern part of the state. They pretty much grow food that's distributed to the rest of the prisons in the state. And he said, well, he says, my biggest regret is that nobody told me, and I didn't know, that when you go to prison, you take your mom with you. And then he went on to explain. He said, I did the crime. I did what I was accused of doing. I am in fact guilty, and I deserve the punishment that I'm getting. I understand that. I understand that if you do the crime, you got to do the time. He says, I can accept that. I can accept that this is my lot in life, to live here in the prison system the rest of my life. He says, I accept the fact that after a few years of me being incarcerated, my wife divorced me. He said she had to move on with her life. I understand that. I don't hold anything against her for doing that. I wish her well. I'm sorry for what I did to her. He said after a few more years, he says, my kids stopped sending me letters. No one was writing me. He said, and eventually all my friends stopped coming to visit me. And I was totally alone, totally alone. He says, but every year on my birthday, I get a card from my mother telling me how much she loves me. Unconditional love can't let go. Unconditional love can't judge. Unconditional love accepts us as we are, right where we are, and is willing to take us wherever we want to go, you know? I mean, think about how messy little kids are. You know? We got to change them several times a day. They spit up all over everything. They spit up on our clothes, in our hair, everywhere. And we love them. We just love them, you know? So we change them, we put clean clothes on them, we put clean clothes on us, we jump in the shower, we jump out. We pick them up. And they do it all over again, you know? none of that bothers us. You see, none of that affects us. We don't hold anything against that little one for behaving the way babies behave. They're doing the best they can with what they are capable of at the moment in time. And we love them just as they are. And our mothers love us that way. And they never get over that. They never get over that. Their love is unconditional. So what we want to bring this to then, what we want to consider is that motherhood, the office of motherhood, whether it's been our personal experience or not, as I say, not everybody had the opportunity of knowing their mother, and not all of our mothers were capable of being there for us in the manner that I've described. But that's okay. It's okay for us. The past is the past. It is the unconditional love that we are seeking, you see. That is the flame. That is the flame that is causing us, the moth, to fly home. Right? As Rumi says, that the moth beats its head against the hurricane glass around the candle until one day it finds the glass is gone and it flies straight into the flame. And even though it is totally consumed, it does so for the ecstasy of uniting with the flame. This unconditional love is there, and we know it is there. It is on the other side of the fan blade, and we want to experience it. Motherhood represents that to us better than any other situation in this human life. And that is what we seek. That is what we desire. Not a love that's based on transaction, you know. I love you if you'll love me. If you love me, you'll do this for me. If I love you, I'll do that for you. Transactional love. Not as Osho says, not a shared delusion in which we create a fantasy world that we live in so that we don't have to look beyond and deal with anything else. We're in our own little world. We have rock and roll songs about that, you know, in our own little world. In fact, if you think about all of the different rock and roll songs about love, you can discard most of them because they're not singing about the kind of love that I'm talking about. Talking about that needy love, you know, I can't live if living is without you kind of love. Think of breathing. Think of breathing. Our breath is always there. But unless there's some kind of a medical condition, we are not aware of it. We don't think about it. It just is. It just is. And if we thought about it, it would become something to do. You know, this is something that sometimes when people are starting to meditate, you know, they're told to breathe a certain way. Like in Zen, for example, I taught belly breathing, you know, that you breathe in and you push out your belly like a balloon, you know, and then when it's completely full, then you push it in. And that's good. That's a good technique, and there's a reason for it. But once we start to deliberately breathe, as in yoga, you know, breathe and fill the top of your lungs up. It's good physically for us. It's good. But once we start to concentrate on how we are breathing, then it becomes a doing, you see. Then it becomes an effort. Then it becomes something that we will grow tired of and we will lose interest in, you know. Who amongst us can sit and breathe in a certain way for a long period of time? But nevertheless, as soon as we get bored with it and move on, breathing takes care of itself. So in our society, what we have tended to do is take something as simple as breathing, which is loving, and we have made it a doing. We have made it an activity. We have made it something to work at. We need to work at this, you know. It's not easy, it's hard, and all those kind of things. And the reason I mention that is that that is not the kind of love that I'm talking about. I'm talking about unconditional love. The straightest, quickest, surest path for spiritual growth is unconditional love. And it is not a thought process. It is not an intellectual exercise. It is not a doing. It is a way of being, a way of living. So when loving becomes as natural to us and as easy to us as our breath, you see, then we can start to get into unconditional love. Now sometimes we read in the Bible and it says, love your enemies, and we have a hard time with that. How can I love my enemies? How can I love those who would do me harm? You know, how can I love those people? Can you breathe? Can you breathe when you're around those people? When loving becomes as natural as breathing, you can still love despite external circumstances. You see, if I say to you, I can't love unless these circumstances are right, that is conditional. That is a conditional love, right? I can't love you unless you love me back. That's conditional love. I can't love you unless you vote the way I do, or go to the same church that I do, or eat the same food that I do. That's conditional love, you see. Unconditional love is not about the person or the behavior or the activity. Unconditional love is about unconditional love. Can we love love? Can we love love? So what this means to us is we want to find in our lives the times that we felt this unconditional love, whether it be with a mother, whether it be with a grandparent, whether it be with a lover, whether it be with a friend. When have we felt just unconditional love? I want nothing from this person. I don't want to control their behavior. I don't need them to act a certain way. I don't need them to think a certain way. All I wish is their true happiness. That's it. That's it. There's a Buddhist meditation on compassion. The Dalai Lama talks about starting his day with this meditation on compassion. He says, can we truly wish for all human beings, even those who would do us harm, even those we would call enemies, can we truly wish for them true happiness? True happiness. When have you experienced that love which is without condition, which is true happiness, wishing true happiness for another? Can you recall that in your memory? Can you bring that feeling back? Not the thought, Not if you're thinking to yourself, "Oh wow, I'm in love." Well, that's not what I'm talking about. It's kind of like meditating. We sit down to meditate and we say, "Oh, oh, oh, I'm doing it. I'm doing it. I'm meditating." No, you just lost it. You just moved beyond it. So meditation is to take us beyond the fan blades of the mind that are spinning into the feeling of love. But there are other ways that we can experience this love. Do we feel it in the presence of a child? Do we feel it in the presence of our pets? Do we feel it in the presence of another human being? Do we feel it when we are alone? When we are alone and we can just sit and close our eyes, you know. And I love the imagery that Dr. Bales gave us. You know, can we sit and visualize this process by which divine love has cared for us every step of the way and recognize that that is unconditional love? You know, the divine didn't know or care. This one will be a saint and that one will be a sinner. It just took care of us through this process. So this unconditional love that I'm talking about is the experience of unity, this experience of oneness, the experience of togetherness that is before thought, is beyond thought. It has no need or desire or agenda of another. Its only wish is true happiness. True happiness. Now, here comes the interesting part. Perhaps. Perhaps it'll be interesting to you. Perhaps. There is that within us which knows to seek the experience of this unconditional love. Motherhood and our mothers in this physical life symbolize that unconditional love to us. But perhaps our moms are gone. Perhaps we did not have an opportunity to know them. Perhaps they were unable, perhaps they were unable to love us in the manner I just described. How then are we to experience that which we are seeking? So divine love would not give us the desire to seek it and then withhold itself from us, right? God does not mock its creation. I think it was Aristotle said, nature doesn't mock its children. We have been created with this innate desire to experience unconditional love. And we can start in the mirror. Can we learn to love ourselves as we are? Can we feel at one with, at one-ment, not atonement, at one-ment with our own selves? Can we stop judging ourselves? Can we stop criticizing ourselves? Can we learn to simply be one with ourselves? Right? Dr. Holmes tells us this in the textbook. Mankind is divided against itself. All of our problems are problems of separation. If we wish to learn to be at one with the divine, we have to start where we are, which is with ourselves. So we have to learn to love ourselves unconditionally. We have to learn to be, in this regard, our own mother, our own example of unconditional love. You see, we can't give what we don't have. It's like they tell you on the airplane, if the oxygen masks drop down, you got to put it on yourself first and then put it on your children, because if you pass out, you're no good to them. Right? The world is full of people who are trying to give something they don't have. They talk about love, they sing about love, they write about love. but do they experience it? Do they experience it? So I invite you this Mother's Day. First of all, we celebrate all mothers everywhere. We celebrate motherhood as a sacred institution of divine love. We mourn for the mothers who have left us. We understand the sadness of those who did not know their moms and wish they did. But we recognize that this divine, unconditional love that motherhood is a symbol of to us can be experienced right now, right here, wherever we are, whatever our situation is. But we do it ourselves. We go within. We learn to love with only one wish: the true happiness. The true happiness. So I invite you this day, take some time. Take some time to be somewhere alone, to close your eyes, to turn within, to bring yourself to that feeling of love. If you want to visualize yourself as an infant before words, experiencing love, experience love without condition, without role, without responsibility. Just love. And as often as you need to, if you come to the realization, oh my goodness, that feeling has slipped away from you, bring yourself back to it. Just bring yourself back to it. That's all. Just bring yourself back to it. Until loving love, feeling love, being love, expressing love is as natural as your breath. Perfect love casts out fear. If we don't know love, we don't know God. The Bible tells us all of these things. We are capable of that love. We can be that instrument of unconditional love to others if we learn how to be that instrument of unconditional love to ourselves. Happy Mother's Day to mothers everywhere. Have a beautiful day, everyone. And so it is. Let's see here. And speaking of unconditional